Hi, welcome to Bostic Educates. I am Dr. Lenise Bostic. I have been a mom, a wife, an educator for over 30 years, and I have helped all 8 of my kids get to college for free. And I want to help you do the same, utilizing the same things that I did through the public school system. All right, so today we're going to be talking about IEPs versus 504 plans. Now, IEPs stand for Individualized Education Plan. And that is a plan that's individualized for your student, for your circumstance. It's individualized and it's unique. An IEP, or an Individualized Education Program, is a legally binding plan under special education law. It includes specialized instruction, goals, and services designed to meet your child's unique needs. Okay, so now 504 is a little bit different. A 504 is a civil rights accommodation plan. It provides access to learning but does not include specialized instruction, so only accommodations. So think IEP has individualized education and it has goals specialized for instruction. 504 just really grants access to the same general education, not necessarily specialized instruction like a 504. And sometimes schools like, let's just do a 504 because it's easier to implement. But 504, while protected, does not have the same amount of protections and laws that special education does. So it's very important that as a parent, you know which one your child will most benefit from, because it definitely matters. And not only for that year, but for the whole duration of their academic career. Whereas an IEP kind of stands year after year after year, a 504 is reevaluated every single year, and you may need it one year and you may not the next. So it's very important that parents are educated and know how to advocate for their child appropriately when they're determining which plan is right. All right, so now let's talk about how you even start the process. I always tell parents, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So going up to a teacher and saying, hey, I think my child needs an IEP, and the teacher replying, yeah, let me get right on it, that means absolutely nothing. You have to do it in writing. And there are a lot of templates and everything and guides online that you can look for to have that conversation with their child's teacher or principal. But you must put it in writing, because that is a documented record that means that you are creating a request, and that request comes with a timeline. They have 10 days to then respond to your request. So they can't just say, hey, we'll talk about it later, or we'll do it later. No, they have to respond to it, and it starts the timeline. And you want to be very, very wary if they say, you don't have to put it in writing, we got you. No, don't. All of it has to be in writing. And then at that point, you're requesting an evaluation. Now, an evaluation is going to evaluate, a psychologist is going to come in and evaluate your child and put them through a battery of tests. And it's not something that you can study for with your child, and you don't need to. You really want to make sure they get the most authentic test results possible. So then you go through that evaluation and you're requesting that, and they'll come in, they'll test your child, and then you'll be able to have an IEP meeting. And that meeting, you'll be able to determine whether or not a 504 or an IEP would be correct course of action. All right, so now in preparation for your meeting or conference, some people look at it as a parent conference, but really it is a meeting. And in that meeting, you have to come prepared. There's certain things that you need to have on your own in preparation before the meeting even starts. For instance, you need to know your students' grades. You need to know how they perform in class. You need to know what the teacher's perspective is and how they're performing in class. You also need to talk to your child. How do they feel they are performing in class? When the teacher explains things, are they getting it immediately, or do they have a lot of questions? Do they feel free to even take instructional risks in asking the teacher questions? And all of those things, you're going to bring that information to the conference. And in that conference, it's important that you're confident, you know what your child is, where they are academically, and you can speak glibly to how your child acts at home versus how they may act at school. So then you, and working in partnership with the school, can come up with the best plan. All right, so in the next part of the meeting, they'll talk about if your child is determined to need an IEP. They're going to talk about needing accommodations, or what types of accommodations. Now, accommodations does not make school easier. It does not make classwork easier. It just provides better access for your student to be able to take advantage of the general education program. So for instance, if a child is struggling with something and they need extended time, that is an accommodation that they're entitled to. So when you want to make sure that you're thinking through and working working with your child's teacher, their psychologist, and even their doctor to think about what type of accommodations does your child need. Extended time is one of the most common ones, but it can also be setting. It might say, I need to be able to be tested within a person that's familiar to my child, because that would be the best opportunity for them to do their absolute best. So you want to go into these meetings knowing what types of accommodations are available, as well as what would be the best for your student. There are several different types of accommodations. You may do sensory support, you may do auditory support, where it's a read aloud, where the questions are read aloud to students, even though that's highly rare, but still that is an accommodation that's available. You can have predictable routines, you can have seating where they seat within the classroom setting. There's a lot of accommodations that are available for students to take advantage of when they're writing their IEP to make sure that their goals are able to be attained. All right, so now during the conference, there's a lot of things that parents do. These what I call like big time mistakes. When you're silent, what they are going to seem to think is that you agree. So if you don't agree, you have to speak up. And just because you're speaking up doesn't mean you're being difficult or not being on the team or anything like that. It just means that you're advocating for your child. And so you want to make sure that you're speaking up and not be silent, because if you're silent, that means you just think they're going to say, okay, well, they agree with everything and move on, especially if you don't agree. And of course, documentation. Documentation is everything. If you have an email that stated one thing and the school says something different, bring that email or be able to reference that email so that it's very clear that it is, this is what we discussed and this is what we had before. I was working with a client before and the teacher just said in the meeting, this child does not need this accommodation and had never used this accommodation before. But in a previous email with the parent, the teacher did say that, hey, this child does need a little bit extra time. So you bring that email to kind of really bolster that child's point to say, hey, they did benefit from extra time and this is what you emailed before, but now we're saying something different in the meeting. Which is it? And that just starts the discussion, not to be adversarial, but to really just make sure that we're doing what's best for your child. And remember, you are your biggest child's advocate. So you have to speak up for your child because they're most likely not going to be able to speak up for themselves. 504s are similar and have a lot of similarities to IEPs, but there's a distinct difference. 504s do not talk or have goals or regarding academics. Therefore, your academic goals and all of that is just not part of the 504 plan. So for example, when my son broke his arm and that affected his academics in the general education curriculum. And so then we needed to look, what kind of accommodations does he need in order to still be successful? So that means he may need extended time. He may needed to sit somewhere a little closer to the teacher to make sure that he was remaining on task, or she needed to be aware if his arm started hurting or had anything to go on. So that is all what would be put in the 504 plan. And the 504 plan can be as short as 30 days, 60 days, or a year. It all depends on how long that challenge is or how long that child has experienced the challenge. So for instance, my child didn't need a 504 the next year because his arm was healed and he was able to do everything without accommodations. So 504s protect the student for as long as that accommodation is needed for the general education curriculum. IEPs are for students that are experiencing challenges with the curriculum and it's an ongoing concern. Very distinct difference. The funding is very different. So schools are funded differently for IEPs than 504s. IEPs are funded through the federal government. They receive funds and it's very clear. 504s, we do not receive the same type of funding for. So schools are very aware of this and we need parents to also be aware of it as well. So if a school is pushing you towards a 504, you need to ask why. And if it's an academic concern, you need to push right on back to an IEP. All right, so now these are some big money mistakes that parents have made. All right, so first, they get outside speech therapy for their student. And outside speech therapy means that you're paying for speech therapy on your own. That can all be put into an IEP. So now, are you one of my homeschool parents? Are you following me from your homeschool? You still have protections under the public school. So you can as well just take advantage of speech therapy for your child in the public school and still homeschool them yourself. A lot of parents don't know that and they're just throwing money away by just paying for it themselves. And we have, as a public school system absolute responsibility to provide that service for our students. Another thing, psychological counseling. That is also something that is provided through the public school through an IEP. So a lot of these protections and things that parents are doing on their own, you can actually get through the public school system. And it starts with an email requesting it and making the formal request through email in writing, and an evaluation to determine the need and how much of the need is. Another big thing that parents miss out on is they think that IEPs are only for students that are struggling. No, or students that are underperforming rather. That's not the case. Gifted students also can have an IEP. They need specialized services. They may need different services or different accommodations as well. So don't limit your thought of what are your access for your child based off of just what you think. Oh, my child makes all A's and they're in the gifted program, they won't need an IEP. That might not necessarily be the case. Is your child struggling emotionally? Is your child struggling with his peers or interacting with their peers? Do they make friends easily? All of those things can be talked about and figured out through an evaluation and made better through the accommodations that an IEP provides. All right, parents, we've talked about a lot of things. We talked about 504s, we've talked about IEPs, and I hope you've gotten a lot from this. But the main thing I want you to get from this and be able to say are these affirmations. I want you to say, I am an informed parent. I am prepared. I know the steps to take for my child to get the best educational outcome for a 504 or an IEP. Again, I am Dr. Lenise Bostic of 8 Educates. I help parents get their kids to college for free.